this man doesn't need much of an introduction. He's hails from Havre, Montana. He's a dedicated farmer, amazing steward to not only a public servant to Montana, but also to our country. And a little known fact, he's also an amazing Pearl Jam fan. Senator, welcome today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I appreciate all the words that Matt had to say. I think that level of common sense there speaks well, and I very much appreciate what he had to say in regards to the virus and the economy and all that stuff.
Well, absolutely. Matt's done a great job for our county and our state. I guess to kick it off with, Senator, you've got such amazing perspective and obviously ties around the country. What grade would you give Montana for our recovery efforts so far? How do you think we're faring?
Well, I used to be a teacher. I graded pretty tough in those music classes. I can't think of much that Montana, particularly the governor, has done wrong so far. I mean, he came out early, as Matt said, and he put down some stuff that at the time I thought, wow, closing schools. When he closed schools, I thought, holy mackerel. But the truth is, in retrospect, he did it right. And I think his opening of the economy has been done correctly too. All this stuff is so up for change, but the truth is, I think that he's been very measured in opening up in an appropriate manner. And I think so far so good. I do think that, we got to continue to monitor, got to continue to listen to the healthcare professionals out there to make sure that this thing doesn't change rapidly and overwhelm the system, because I think that still could happen. But so far so good. I think the economy's opened up pretty well in Montana. I don't think it's that way all over the country, and for good reason. But from a Montana perspective, I think things are progressing in the appropriate manner. And I think the governor's had his finger on the pulse and done a pretty darn good job.
No, absolutely. Well, I hear that a lot. And so I think that hopefully we'll continue that trend. Senator, what's something, as we shift into this next stage, what's something that you're hopeful for?
I'm hopeful we get enough tests. I mean, I think that's the thing that's really frustrating about this. I mean, and I'll just tell you the way I see it. I mean, I heard the president again say today, if you want a test, you can get a test. There's no problem. I can't get a test. I mean, I called the physician here in the Capitol and said, you know what? I've got to go home, and I've got a farm, and I've got stuff I have to do. My son's living with it. He's an asthmatic. I'd love to get a test on Wednesday or Thursday to make sure that I'm not bringing coronavirus back into our house. And they said, look, unless you've got symptoms or unless you're exposed to a known coronavirus person that's been infected, you can't get a test. And look, I mean, I don't want to test because I want to test. I want to test to keep people safe. I think that's the same thing with the economy. I think if we get enough tests out there, I think the economy opens up much quicker. I think take the park for an example. At some moment in time, the park is going to open up, and how they do it and how it's been done is going to be a real feat. But if they had tests so that anybody that had a fever or anybody that thought that they had coronavirus could get tested, man, oh man, that makes such a big difference on not only determining if it's safe, but also tracking, because you're going to have people from all walks of life walk into the parks all over the country. And so I think tests are where it's at right now. There's work being done on a vaccine, of course, but tests are really critical. People like me or any public policy person can say, the economy's opened up, but unless people feel like it's safe for them to go out, especially if they're over the age of 65 or even 60, they're not going to do it unless they think it's safe. And so that's what's really important here is tests, in my book.
Yeah, absolutely. On the recovery side of it, what same question. I mean, what are you hopeful for on the recovery side, or how would you talk about, how your feelings are with that so far as we've started to slowly turn the lights back on per se and step back out there?
Well, first of all, my heart goes out, especially to the folks that have the bars and the restaurants that are in the hospitality business. They're the folks, that are running the buses, that all that stuff. They just got hammered on this stuff. So I'm hoping that what's been going on right now works, and I'm hoping that the distancing that the bars and the restaurants are using works so that they can stay open and keep going. I don't think we will be back to normal and this isn't a big secret, until we get a vaccine, and not to beat tests up again, but tests would help with that opening. Um, I see, I see things moving in the right way. Look, I flew back here a week ago today. The plane was half full. I flew back here today. I would say it was 2/3 full. I mean, to the point where I was feeling like I couldn't get the social distancing on that plane because it was only a 50-passenger plane. I bet there was 35 people on it in the front row, not having anybody in it. It, it was the fullest flight I've seen in over 2 months.
Right.
So I think things are starting to move. I think that being cautious is something that people need to continue to do. I mean, I think you can still have an economy that opens up and still be smart about it. If I need to go in and buy a battery from my wholesaler to put in my car, I don't want to be hugging the guy that's selling me the battery. Let him set the battery out, make the space, hand the credit card, wash your hands, do all that stuff. And I think the economy will move forward much quicker if that's the case, because we'll be using our head. But make no mistake about it, as policymakers or as business people or as government officials, however you want to classify yourself, work in public, Mother Nature always bats last on this deal. The virus is going to do what the virus is going to do. We just need to try to adapt to keep ourselves safe. But I think in Montana, it's a different story back here in DC. I mean, there's nothing open back here. And if you walk into a grocery store, you'll play hell getting within 10 feet of anybody back here, because man, I'll tell you what, I've never seen anything like it like last week. I mean, they respect the social distancing stuff to the max. And like, you'll be in line to check out, you look behind you, and hell, the next person's 10 or 15 feet behind you. And that's just the way it is all the way down the line.
Wow.
So, but it's a petri dish back here compared to Montana.
Right.
But the truth is, we still need to know that it can affect rural America. So I think the economy is going to open, and it'll continue to open and do good things as long as people respect the virus. Let's just put it that way.
No, respect is a good word. And, Senator, I share a first-person story, and we work with a lot of businesses here in Big Sky, and a lot of what you'd see around the state that you know so well is businesses, under 50 people. We were amazed that PPP money showed up. I will tell you that I bet friends that I never thought that check would arrive, and it showed up, and I'm extremely grateful for it. And it's allowed us to go out. But I think the one challenge that we had was it didn't allow us to budget. Like a lot of people used to taking money and budgeting it. We're forced to spend the money a certain way, when it's great. It's allowed our employees to be propped up. But here's the question. After these 8 weeks end, a lot of people are starting to get really worried that that's when we're going to see that cliff edge. So I guess, what advice would you have for businesses that did get that money, and let's talk about week 9.
So, I mean, I think, as with any business, you have to plan. You have to look at the landscape, and you have to plan to try to meet that landscape. And I think you're going to be nervous. I mean, I'm nervous, and I'm not in as high a risk of business as the bars and the restaurants and the motels and those kind of folks are. But you look at your landscape, and you determine how you're going to move forward, assuming that business is going to open, but probably not to the bore it was last year at this time, or last year in June or July. And then I would say, if it looks like there's not going to be enough money there to keep the wolves away from the door, and you do have the prospects of maintaining that business moving forward, because let's just be honest, there's going to be some businesses that are not going to survive this. That's very unfortunate, but it is a fact. Just like there's going to be some people that aren't going to survive this, and it's a fact. But the truth is look at the landscape, and if there are programs, idle programs, a prime example, it's a loan program, it's a low interest loan program that businesses use, and it works pretty effectively through HUD. And I think that if that's a program that can work, then we can take a look at possibly plussing some of them up moving forward. If not through a package, which I don't know that there is going to be another package, but we're going to be working on next year's appropriations, and it's coming right up at the end of September. And so there's ways we can plus that up going forward too. But you got to communicate. Make sure you call my offices, call me, get a hold of everybody, and I'd get a hold of the whole delegation. I'd get a hold of the governor's office too, and say this is what we see coming down the road. This is the valley of death that we're worried about now, and are the things that you can do to help us even that out moving forward.
Okay, well, good advice. Switching gears, I mean, there's obviously a lot of other things you're passionate about working on. The world can't stop with COVID. You know, so what are some other bills or things that you'd like to share the audience with that you're passionate with? And I know that a lot of people are really curious on what impact COVID's potentially had on the Great American National Outdoors Act. That's really a big deal for us down here with the parks and a lot of that,
Yeah.
you know, the Land Water Conservation Fund. So any updates there?
Well, I'll just on the park dollars and the land and water conservation full funding and permanent funding, that's all been kind of put on the back burner. There's been some push to put it on another COVID package that comes through. I don't know if there's going to be another COVID package. One of the things that's frustrating about, and there could be, and if there is, we'll push to try to get it on. But one of the things that is frustrating about the United States Senate is that there's a lot of good bipartisan bills out there that we don't get a chance to take the floor and debate and then vote. If it goes down with a vote, it goes down. If it passes, it passes. Instead, we sit around here and literally don't do much but vote on nominees, and it drives me up a wall. So we could take that great outdoors package and put it to the Senate floor or get it to committee and get it out. We're doing that stuff. A lot of these committees we're doing virtually now, so there's no problem. And get it to the floor, have the debate. You know, we never debate when there's more than one person on the floor anyway, so this all fits into the role of the Senate, and try to get that out, and it can happen. But it's kind of on the back burner right now because everything's COVID all the time. I'll tell you a couple things that I'm working on. I've got a mental health bill that I'm working for veterans that I think can help the VA deal with an issue that has been a plague for them for the last 15, 20 years, and that's a veteran every hour taking their life in this country. And make no mistake about it, if we can get this stuff done, get this bill done so the VA has the tools. It's stuff thinking outside the box stuff, you know, equine therapy, yoga, you name it. There's a lot of stuff out there that just is better for a lot of people than sitting on a couch and talking to somebody. But if we can get that done, there's some grants in it to help. I think that will not only help the VA, but we've got a mental health issue in this country and a suicide issue. We know that in Montana, as we lead the nation in suicide, or at least did last year. Hopefully we don't get that again this year, and we can help with the general population too, if we can find the right formula here. So that mental health bill, which will be the piece that comes out of Congress this year, if we can get it passed. By the way, and it passed the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee 19-0. The most conservative and the most liberal person on that committee both voted for it. So it tells you the kind of thrust it has. That can be very positive. I'm also, you've heard a lot, this is sort of COVID related actually, but it's been going on for 15 years. And that is what's going on in the beef industry and the packers and the consolidation in the beef industry, and how that's putting small and medium feeders out of business. We've seen the price of beef bump up a little bit, but my God, it's been in the sewer. A lot of it's because of all the trade stuff that's gone on over the last 2-3 years. But COVID and the packing plants closing down have also multiplied on the negative impacts on cow-calf operators and small and medium-sized feeders. So we've done a couple things. I've asked the Attorney General to do an investigation in the packer industry to find out if there's any collusion and if the laws that we have on the books are working. I don't think Attorney General Barr is going to do that. If he has, he certainly hasn't got back to me and told me he is going to do it. And by the way, it wasn't just me. There were many, many senators that signed on to multiple letters asking Barr to do that. So I've started drafting bills. I've got 5 of them that are going to basically attach the price of box beef to the price that they're getting in the feedlot, so that it's a regulation. And I'm not crazy about regulation myself, but if capitalism isn't working, you have to do something about that. And if we lose these small and medium-sized feeders because they're losing $300, $400, $500 a head, and they're making over $2,000 a head, that's not fair. And so we've got to do something about that. So I've got a number of bills that we're working on right now knowing full well that these are going to be hard to get across the line because the Packers like it this way, and they've got, in my opinion at least, they've got the market pretty well sewed up, and so to hell with everybody else, they're going to make their money, and if the other guys go broke, they go broke. But I think it has some major impacts, not only on the cattle industry and the hog industry, but it also has an major impact on the consumers and the cost of protein. So we're working on those things right now. We're also working on some broadband issues for rural America, hopefully getting it so we can get some money out the door to lay some broadband, which, by the way, existed before COVID, but COVID has really brought this to the attention, especially when we're doing telehealth and teleeducation. And so it just really showed where the digital divide is, and how we need to make more of an investment if we're going to keep rural America in the 21st century.
Well, thank you. All those that's a mouthful, and that's a lot of work. So thank you for that. Last question I have for you, Senator, and then I'll turn over to my colleague, Joe. He's got one or two questions from the audience, and I always love to ask people that are serving our country and our nation. This question is, what's something that you're grateful for?
Well, this is still the greatest country in the world, and I'm grateful for the ability of people to be able to speak up, even though sometimes I look at the TV and I question why they're doing what they're doing. But by the same token, they have every right to do it, and I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that I live in Montana. I'm going to tell you that all you have to do is live in a city, and I've never been a city person anyway, but I will tell you that Washington, D.C. is probably as good a town as there is in the country. But damn, I'm going to tell you what, I'm so happy. I live in Montana, and my wife there, and our farms there. I mean, my folks chose right. What can I say? And my grandparents chose right.
Right.
And I just am very, very thankful for that. I got to tell you something. If I didn't have to come back to Washington, D.C., I could self-isolate pretty damn easily, because you're pretty much self-isolated on the farm by default.
Oh, absolutely. Well, we'll look forward to seeing you back on the landscape here soon, Senator. I'll throw it over for one or two more questions. Grateful for your time today. Joe, do you have one or two questions from the audience?
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Eric, and thanks, Senator Tester, for being here. You know, I think the last time you and I saw each other, I was on your ranch, and we had a good interview there. But
I still got the hats, man. Still got those hats.
Oh, good. Yeah, that was a great time. You know, you mentioned your recent plane rides. Congress is back in session, and you flew back to D.C. on May 4th. You were trying to get there for a 5:30 vote for the nomination.
And again today.
Yeah.
And again today. Yeah. Go ahead.
And again,
Go ahead, Joe.
and again today. Right. Well, that first one, you know, that was an eventful trip. It began in Montana at 1:30 in the morning and ended in D.C. 15 hours later. That sounds like it must have been a new experience for you.
Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, typically before COVID, the plane would take off in Great Falls at 6 in the morning and get into DC at about 1:45, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I would get up at 3 in the morning to get to the airport by 5 to take that 6 a.m. flight out. And since I still farm, and since you still need to get around the state, pre-COVID days, I did that virtually every weekend. I mean, literally a handful of days, I'd miss those and stay here on a weekend. But the flight a week ago on Monday was a little different, because I had to get up at 1, get on the road by 1:30, and you know, you give yourself an hour before the flight takes off, but then I give myself another hour in case you got a flat tire, because I had to drive 4.5 hours, and I had to swap out, get a rental car, make sure all that stuff works. You just have to allow some extra time. And then I got there, and thank God I can sleep on a plane, because I got to Missoula and jumped on that United flight, and the lady said that was the busiest flight. It was half full. It was the busiest flight they had had in 2 months, which was a good sign. And then we took off and went into Denver. And you know, a guy gets kind of rummy when you don't get much sleep, and I didn't get much sleep that night. And it's kind of funny, because I think I landed at C Concourse in Denver, if you guys are familiar with that airport, the C-25. We were taking off for DCA, for DC Airport, and I look up and it's got Sacramento. I go, geez, Sacramento. This flight hasn't taken off yet, and I'm wandering around. There's not that many people in the airport anyway, and I look, and hell, I got to go out of B concourse, so I'm just lucky I just didn't dope off and miss my flight. So I jumped on the train, got to B, and B-25. Sure enough, DCA was up on the board, so I could make the flight. But it's one of those things. It's part of the job, flying back and forth to Montana. I told you how grateful I was for living in Montana. You know, the negative thing living in Montana is you got to want to get there from DC and get to DC from Montana. So it takes you some time to do it. But it's cool. It's good. You know, the airlines for the most part they do a good job. I'm a little frustrated today because they're running a 50 passenger plane and picking up people in Great Falls and then stopping in Helena and picking up people, which is fine. But hell, why not run some of those 75 passengers that are grounded so people can distance themselves on those planes a little better? I don't get it, but it is the way it is. I'm sure they've got their challenges too.
Sure. Well, you know, I remember when I interviewed you rather a few years ago at your ranch, you talked about one of the biggest differences about being in DC as opposed to Montana was the birds, and that in DC you didn't hear them as much as, you know, obviously when you wake up on your farm. You know, what is one of the biggest differences you experienced in our nation's capital versus Montana? And again, you know, if you could talk about you know, what you appreciate about this area that keeps you coming back and keeps you here.
Yeah, Joe. So I mean, look, I'm incredibly blessed. And I think we all are living in Montana. I had a 7:40 flight this morning out of Great Falls, so I got up at 5 and walked outside at about 5:15, and the birds were singing. They were really going at it. And I said to my wife, I said, listen to that, man. I mean, listen to it. It's a beautiful thing. Birds sing here in DC too, but they never know, since the lights never go out, they never know when to go to bed. So they literally are chirping all night long. But the truth is that you know, they were going pretty strong this morning at 5. I will tell you that you know, part of what is different here, and there's a lot of differences, but the town, you know, when you're in a town, and you know, Bozeman, Great Falls, Billings, Missoula, there's kind of like this, but there's very seldom any time where if you don't listen, you don't hear a siren going off somewhere in this town where ambulances are going. Where I live, and I always tell the people coming to me and say, well, you're from Montana. The Unabomber was caught in a remote area of Montana. That's Lincoln, Montana. I said, well, Lincoln is remote by these standards, but if you really want to see remote, go to Big Sandy, Montana. That's really remote. But you just don't see people unless you want to see people, and that's a huge difference. It's really a 180 degree in my life that, you know, I'll be sitting, you know, on a tractor for 16 hours a day, and the only person I'll see is my wife, and then, you know, I'll see, you know, maybe 40 or 50 people walking 4 blocks to the office here. So it's urban versus rural. It's urban versus frontier, actually, and I'm just very thankful that I'm able to be able to, I guess, appreciate both, actually. I mean, they both have their advantages. If I need a carton of milk, I can walk a couple blocks, go get a carton of milk. If I'm at the farm, it's a 26-mile round trip. So, you know, advantages.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Senator, thank you very much. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk to the audience about? Anything you want to mention that we haven't brought up?
Yeah, the only other thing I'd bring up is that, you know, there's been a lot of talk of another COVID package coming through, and there may be. I know the Speaker of the House is working on one. I just don't know what the right thing to do is here. I mean, I can tell you that when we went through the meltdown in 2008, when it was a worldwide financial meltdown, we put about $800 billion into the economy, and it helped pop it around. We put right at $3 trillion into it this time around, and they're talking about another trillion or two going into it, and it's all borrowed money. And I think that you do need to push money into an economy when you have economic down cycles, recessions, depressions. But what concerns me is at what point is the debt become an issue, and we may already be there. I don't know. That's the question. At what point does the debt become an issue where it becomes a boat anchor on any sort of recovery? And that's really the question. So that's my concern right now as we're moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's a tough one. That's obviously something that everybody's working on, but appreciate your thoughts about that. And thanks very much again for visiting with us today. We appreciate your time and what you're doing in DC.
Yep. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate the opportunity at any time. Okay.